Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Jim Grazanzio from Oracle, and I'm back here tonight to talk about Oracle Developer Live. And I'm here with two speakers. These are OpenJDK developers at Oracle, Julia Boos and Chris Hegarty from Ireland. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having us.
Hi, happy to be here.
It's really nice to meet you both here tonight. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe a little bit about the community, a little bit about Java, a little bit about your session. So let's start off with your session. What are you talking about?
Yes. Hey, so the title of our session is How Records Can Make Serialization Better. And records are really taking the center stage of the session. So they are a preview feature in Java 14. They were then re-previewed in Java 15 and are now final in Java 16. And records are a special type of class that models data aggregates. And as such, they come with a really nice coupling of immutable state and an API to access that state and construct a record. And as such, they have various good use cases, and one of them is serialization. So in the talk, we introduce records, show what they are about. We then introduce the concept of serialization. And then we look at how we can bring those two together and how we can leverage records in that context. So yes, they were first previewed around a year ago in Java 14. And now they're final. There have been some small changes and tweaks. For example, the special type of constructor that records have, called the canonical constructor, changed its access modifier to be the same as the class. So there were some small changes, but overall they haven't really changed that much. And people have been testing them out, and they're really kind of out there now to be used. And we can already see some use cases outside of the JDK happening, which is nice.
Okay, cool. When we were talking a little bit earlier, Chris, you mentioned that you're going to be doing a little bit of a live demo. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so as Julia said, records are still relatively new, even though we've been working on them for more than a year now. But so before we can talk about how records and serialization interact and work together, I guess it makes sense to talk about records themselves, so what they are, how they work, and how a developer may write a record, and what are the key concepts, the semantic concepts in a record itself. So we do a walkthrough in the IDE, and we look at the features of records in that context in a simple example.
So what type of developers do you expect? It's sort of a general question in the sense of, essentially who the audience is, for this. Is it, general Java? Is it, general Java developers? Is everybody going to be using this new feature? Or is it a highly specialized thing? Or is it for a certain market?
Yeah, good question. So I think records are interesting to almost all Java developers. They have a very wide reach, and they have been something that developers have been looking for a long time. So in that respect, I think at least a part of our session that talks about records and the details of records should be of interest to almost any Java developer. But equally, we believe that records bring additional semantics for frameworks. So for example, serialization is just one framework that can use records. So if you're a framework developer, you probably have an interest as well. What does that mean for you if you want to support records in your framework or your library?
Okay, cool. Interesting. All right. So I want to transition a little bit, talk about the community, since Java is an open source project. How do you work with the community? I mean, this is an open source project. As you mentioned, this feature has been evolving for a couple of versions now. It was, preview in 14 and 15. So how do you work with the community in your jobs?
Maybe I take a first answer on that, and then Chris can elaborate because he's been around a little bit longer. So yeah, as you said, OpenJDK is an open source project. We have various mailing lists for different projects, for example, Amber, which Records is a part of. So a lot of interaction happens there in a classic way with email conversations. It can also, now that we transitioned to GitHub last year as OpenJDK project, happen on GitHub through pull requests. And then we have various, if there's no pandemic, opportunities to meet in person. For example, the OpenJDK committers workshop. The last one was in Brussels, kind of a year ago.
What happens at the OpenJDK committers project?
So the OpenJDK committers workshop, the last and the first one that I was around, was organized as I think it's called unconference. So it's very informal. People get together. There's no agenda decided in advance, but instead people on the day vote for certain topics, and then they go into breakout rooms. And often it's topics that are kind of hot topics, maybe new projects that might evolve, or current ongoing projects that still have a lot of questions around them. But maybe, Chris, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That was the last conference I was at last year. It was February last year, but the committers workshop before COVID has used to happen twice a year. Once around February, and then later on around fall in the US somewhere. So it alternates between the US and Europe, which is kind of nice because there's can be a different set of attendees at the workshop. Not everyone gets to travel internationally for these kind of events. But exactly as Julia mentioned, the content is driven by the attendees themselves. So these are people who are working directly on the JDK itself and committing changes to the JDK. And it's just an opportunity for us to get together and have a conversation face to face and discuss things. So it's a really, really useful venue for these kind of discussions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really glad you told me about that because I wasn't aware of it. I've been to several, unconferences, for the Java community in the last, few years. So I'll have to go to that one, hopefully in the future when you have it again. Okay, so how records can improve serialization. So this is a good look at your talk, and hopefully we'll get to meet both of you soon. Thanks a lot for joining me. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.